The following program is to provide entertainment and information. It is not considered to be any legal or investment advice. Good morning, appraisers. Let's talk some real estate. You're listening to the Voice of Appraisal, the #1 appraisal podcast in America that brings you the latest news and information from the front lines of the real estate market. Anything from market conditions, appraisal regulations, cryptocurrencies, Washington, D.C. news. Folks, you have a question, we have all of your answers. We are the one-stop source for all of your real estate appraisal information needs. If you want to be in the know, you have definitely tuned in to the right show. I'm your host, Phil Crawford. Happy to have all of you here with us today. Kevin, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing good. Hey, There's one thing you forgot to mention in the intro there.
Yes, sir.
We now talk to movers and shakers.
We talk to movers and shakers and policymakers in Washington, D.C. An amazing week that just took place in Washington, D.C. Appraisers Week. That's what we call it, Appraisers Week. And it was absolutely unbelievable. I've got a lot of news and information to go over with all of you. I've got a lot of inside information. I've picked up some new insights after being in D.C., after meeting with certain people. So I do want to share all of that, and we want to get to it ASAP. First of all, a big thank you to Jonathan Miller and to Lori Noble. All three of us went up to Washington, D.C., representing FindMyAppraiser.com, and we did a great job promoting real estate appraisers and promoting the real estate appraisal profession to everybody that we met. I'm so proud to be doing this with Jonathan, doing this with Lori. You should have seen them when we were meeting with Maxine Waters' office. I'll get to that in just a little bit. You should have seen Lori when we were at American Enterprise Institute. And folks, you are being represented in Washington, D.C. very well by FindMyAppraiser.com and by the American Society of Appraisers. I'm going to tell you that right now. There are people up there supporting you. Support those appraisers who support you. Give your support to FindMyAppraiser.com. Join the American Society of Appraisers. They are looking out for you. They're doing very well for you. They've got your back. So make sure that you support them. We've got to be able to secure our future right now. I know a lot of you out there, especially those of you that are part of the FindMyAppraiser.com network, you're calling me up. You're emailing me. Listen, my kid may want to do this. They're 18 years old. They're 20 years old. They're thinking about getting into the real estate appraisal profession. What do I do? Do I put them into it? Do I not? This is a good business. This is a profitable business. What do I do? We have to be able to secure our future, and there are people up there that are doing a terrific job. John Russell of the American Society of Appraisers is one of them. There's many, many more, and especially with FindMyAppraiser.com. FindMyAppraiser.com is going to be a big, big mover and shaker in Washington, D.C. as time goes on. I appreciate your support. It is a publicist platform for those that speak for us, not for any other part of this valuation space. There's a lot of voices in the AMC world. There's a lot of voices in the evaluation space. We need a public relations firm that supports real estate appraisers. And remember, when it comes to PR firms, they call me and they're asking for information about the appraisal process so they can go out there and promote. They don't know how to speak the language. Real estate appraisers know how to speak appraisal language. And when you get people together like myself and Jonathan and Lori and Janelle and Jamie, you've got appraisers that know how to speak the language and know how to be effective when it comes to public relations. And that's what just took place last week in Washington, D.C. I want to give a shout out. Now, this is when I'm going to freak some people out. This is going to scare them right here. I want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to Joan Trice.
Yes, people, you heard.
I want to thank Joan Trice, and I want to thank Edward Pinto at the American Enterprise Institute and the CRN for being so hospitable to myself and to Lori Noble. We went to the American Enterprise Institute 8th Annual Housing Conference, and I had a terrific time. We were in a room with movers and shakers, and they directly affect policymakers. Folks, this is where it took place. This is where it happens. And I'll tell you, I don't believe, unless Ernie's been to it several times, Ernie Durbin has been, they have never had an appraiser presence like Lori and I were able to provide in that room. So many people came up to us. So many people from the media came up to us. So many people from different think tanks, different organizations, all these people out there looking for answers and looking for the perspective of the working real estate appraiser, and we were able to do that. We went into that room as FindMyAppraiser.com. We didn't give out business cards. We gave out big postcards that had FindMyAppraiser.com on it, and Lori and I took great big Sharpies, and we wrote our name on there, and we put down our email address and our personal cell phones, If any of them need to get a hold of us, they can. But this is the room that we need to have a substantial amount of influence in. And I'll tell you something else, because there's a lot of bankers in there. Most of them are economists. These are your data people, okay? We're going to go over some sound bites when it comes to what we talked about. This anchoring situation is really on the minds of everybody. We're going to talk about a little bit the sales price anchoring, the land anchoring. That's a huge deal that took place at the American Enterprise Institute. We'll get into those sound bites here in just a minute. Again, a big special thanks to Ed Pinto and to Joan Trice for their hospitality at that event. So we do it there. We were there for 2 days. Then we jumped on over and we met with the network of real estate appraisers coalitions, broke down what the news of the day was, broke down what we had discussed, what we have found out, and broke down how Find My Appraiser was going to move forward. The one thing that I kind of worry about, and I think when it comes to organizations, in Washington, D.C., it's all about politics. And sometimes when you're an organization and you're meeting with a group, maybe that group is a little right-leaning. So if it's right-leaning and you're an organization and the state that you come from maybe perhaps is a left-leaning state, then sometimes you get the perception that people affiliate you with the right-leaning organization. You see what I'm saying? And that can happen on the other side too, vice versa. So when you're an organization like a coalition, you really have to kind of watch the meetings that you take, because you don't want to give the appearance that you're going from one side or another, if that makes sense. The great thing about a public relations campaign and a public relations firm is that we're there for one thing and one thing only, and that is the promotion of the real estate appraisal profession, what we do. And meeting with both sides, meeting with both Democrats and Republicans, is a benefit for real estate appraisers as a whole. So we broke that down with a network of real estate coalitions, went out to a nice dinner. Lori Noble, thank you very much. Lori Noble set up dinner for that night, made all the arrangements. We went ahead and bought a round of drinks. So it was a really good time with the network. Then we jumped on over to Maxine Waters' office, met with Esther and her staff, terrific young people. The young gentleman that met with us actually is from Georgia and at one time thought about becoming a real estate appraiser. So it worked out perfectly. We're sitting here, we're talking about these things. I wish you were in the room. It was the three of us. It was Jonathan, Lori, and myself. We went over all the talking points that we wanted to go over with them. We were supposed to be in there for a half an hour. We were in there for an hour and a half answering all these questions. We answered some very difficult questions that came up from that last hearing. That last appraisers hearing in Washington, D.C., well, that was the one that I blew up Esther's email on, okay? Yeah, I blew up her email, and I apologize for doing that, but we handled some of those highly sensitive topics in that last hearing. You should have been there. You should have seen how Jonathan handled himself. You should have seen how Lori handled himself. Listen, folks, good things are taking place. The appraisers are being well represented. So trust me, we are making a big impact. We've made some new connections now. We are continuing to broaden our sphere of influence. And I tell you, as time goes on, it's just going to get better and better. FindMyAppraiser.com has got to get bigger and bigger and bigger so we can go out there and we can keep pushing the appraiser's message. And a special thanks again to Lori, to Jonathan, to Janelle, to Jamie. Got a great team together. Big things are happening. This is our got milk moment. This is our beef, it's what's for dinner moment. This is a nationwide marketing campaign, and we are going to start changing paradigms up there, and we are going to start making a big impact on movers and shakers and policymakers. Got a good team in place, folks. Support the appraisers that support you. Join FindMyAppraiser.com today. Join the ASA, the American Society of Real Estate Appraisers. Now, let's talk about this anchoring situation. This was a big shocker. When I was in the American Enterprise Institute 2-day event, a lot of talk on anchoring. And what I was able to do is get the other perspective, the perspective of the banker when it comes to the property inspection waivers. So on day number 2 of the event, this was all about valuation. This was all about the appraisal process and all of these things. So they had a panel. And John Russell was on the panel. He was brought in last minute. I'm glad he was. He did a terrific job representing appraisers and representing what happens to appraisers in some of these transactions. So the big thing they showed was that there's a huge anchoring. I think Fannie Mae calls this sales contract bias, is what Fannie Mae calls it. There's a huge anchoring to the sales contract price in the appraisal process, and there's a big anchoring to the assessed value when it comes to the land. So just to let all of you know this right now, FHFA is monitoring all of your appraisals. All the data that you're putting in to the CU, to the check-up check, to the collateral underwriter, they're monitoring that and they're creating data off of it. The one thing that they're showing is that there is a huge anchoring. In other words, the land value that you put in On that cost approach, in that first line, they're showing a huge anchoring to assessed values throughout the country. So how do they know this? Because they're comparing what you put down and what the assessed value is. Now, there's arguments back and forth, left and right on this, but that is one of the things that they're looking at FHFA. So they're saying, okay, well, the appraisers are anchoring to the land value and they're anchoring to the sales price. So remember that word anchoring, because the word anchoring is directly affecting the waiver program, okay? Now, John Russell, who's on the panel, makes a terrific point about technology and the appraisal profession. So remember, you're feeding the machine, and John talks about appraisers feeding the machine and getting that data back. So Kevin, give me soundbite number 1, John Russell on the panel.
Technology can improve the process, expedite the process, but machines are terrible at forming opinions.
Yes.
Because we're not very good at teaching them how. So you still need a human being there with judgment who can form an opinion and understand how that opinion is based on all of the information in front of them. Now, we can get that information to them faster. We can get it to them in a more diverse way, in more robust ways.
Yes.
But ultimately, you need someone with judgment to form that opinion. I think that's still the vital element that the technology just can't solve for yet, nor do I think it ever really can, because there's just certain intuitive things that we as humans sense. You know, it's that weird squishiness that you can't quantify. It's like nailing jello to the wall. Try as you might, you're never going to be able to do it. But you still have to have that judgment there. I think that's
now here he starts to address the data.
Absolutely, it's funny. I think appraisers have generally always been technology forward. They just don't get the credit for it.
That's right.
I think they've worked very hard to use technology, but the data part is also lacking as well. We've kind of kicked around UCDP a little bit here. It's great that others want to have the data. So do the appraisers who populated it in the first place. So I think it only makes sense to let them have some access there as well in a way that helps inform overall the work that they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So in other words, we're putting the data in, so we should look at and get access to the data that we're putting in. That's one of the big disadvantages that we have as real estate appraisers. You sit there and you send a report in, it goes in through the system, and then they're coming back with you saying, well, our data indicates this. Well, let me see the data. Let me see it. So John Russell does a phenomenal job breaking down that situation. And remember, that is going to be something big in the future. The last show that we did, Joan Trice went out and said that the pilot programs, the bifurcated programs and all the PIWs, were currently shelved or on hold. And we got that information not only from Joan, but we got that from other sources inside Washington, D.C. Well, guess what? Something happened at the Industry Advisory Council, because then the paradigm or the conversation shifted over to, nope, we're going to go ahead forward with it. So we're on our way back into the PIW world. We're on our way back into the bifurcated world. Now that's what we heard then coming out of IAC. Now, there could be the mentality where you have a bunch of people out there saying, well, if we talk about it enough and we speak about it enough, then it will become a reality. I don't know if it's that, or I don't know what the situation is, or keep a close eye on it, because now what we're hearing is this time next year, only 30% of all the loans that are made are going to have an appraisal done to it. So 70% are going to be waived. Kevin, it was crazy.
That's insane.
We were sitting in there with a gentleman that told me that title companies are gone in 18 months. There is no such thing as a title company in 18 months. So we're getting all of this information thrown at you. It's just like information overload. You're trying to figure out which way it's going, and it does take some time. But the most important thing is as all this information is flowing at you, you have to keep promoting that third-party unbiased neutrality. So that's your buzzword. Watch the buzzword of anchoring, and watch the buzzword that we're putting out there consistently through findmyappraiser.com of third-party neutrality, the neutral position. That will be very powerful in the future. So anyways, they did a terrific job on the panel, and this is me at the American Enterprise Institute talking about our neutrality when it comes to consumer protection.
There's one thing I want to bring up when it comes to this appraisal modernization, property inspection waivers, aka appraisal waivers. We have a real issue in this country with consumer protection. And I think when you look at your portfolios and you look at your risk assessment, they may make sense to you, but they may not make sense to the consumer. And I think that's the big part that's going to be a problem in the future. John brought up the fact that when a PIW is done on a purchase, which, by the way, I never think that a waiver should ever be done on a purchase transaction. Ever.
Boom.
If that happens, there's the problem where the consumer thinks that the property is valued at that amount.
Consumer has no knowledge.
Consumer lacks knowledge of what they're buying.
No knowledge.
and at the same time, it may skew the data set. And this is a big problem. I'll tell you right now that lawyers would love to be in a position to say that that sales contract was not fully executed.
That's right.
Because you didn't have that appraisal done. And they would love to come after those E&O insurance policies.
We're going to sue everybody, Kevin.
And those realtors that were involved on it. So consumer protection in this situation is just paramount. It's a big issue, and just like this young lady in the back here, she's looking at a financial position when she buys a home. So they need to understand that that appraisal is not done for them, but done for the bank.
I brought up the young lady in the back. She had asked a question just before my comment. She was a young millennial, and she basically said, look, I need help. I need to understand what I'm buying. This is a financial position. And I'll tell you something about these millennials out there, folks. And by the way, Washington, D.C. is a millennial city like you never believe. They're looking at home ownership as a financial position. They're not buying the Don Draper, Mad Men, home ownership is the American dream that the National Association of Realtors has been pushing out for 50 years. The millennials are getting screwed. They know it, and they're looking at it as a financial position. Does this make sense for me, and what's going to happen? I'll tell you, when we were meeting with Maxine Waters' office, I was in front of two millennials. As soon as we bring up your financial position, boom, they're locked in. They want to know what the situation is. The market is the millennial buyer. They're not emotionally attached to these real estate transactions like the baby boomers were or like the Gen Xers were. They want to know what their position is. So being third party, neutral, helps with their knowledge. If they've got the proper knowledge in that financial transaction, then that promotes consumer protection. So those are my comments when it came to that. Then a gentleman by the name of Mark Fleming. He's the chief economist for First American. Very, very nice guy. Very pro appraiser. Now, he's going to come out and he's going to say a couple things about pro PIW, but listen to him because you have to see where he's coming from with this. But he is a very pro appraiser person, okay? So go ahead and let's listen to what Mark has to say when it comes to the PIW process.
Mark Fleming, First American. So I think you make a very valid point about protection of the consumer, and Joan and John, you also mentioned the idea of the independence of the appraisers being an important aspect of their involvement particularly in a purchase transaction.
Okay,
this
listen.
is a key benefit that we want the consumer to get. And the distinction, Joan, you made of the difference between sale price and value. How do you reconcile those purported benefits with the fact that when we look at the data, 99% or more of the time, the contracted sale price is exactly equal to or within 1% of the appraised value? The appraiser is anchoring, even more so than 99%. The charts we were looking at yesterday, anchoring to that contract sale price. So are we really getting that benefit that we're all saying the appraiser gives us?
No, because they're not independent.
Exactly, Joan.
How do we fix that?
Well, that is the key to everything.
Joan was about ready to make a phenomenal point, and Ernie Durbin's going crazy in the front row. They're trying to get the microphone over to him. She was going to make a good point, but Ernie, go on.
To me, appraiser independence is stand up and do your job. I really mean that, Joan. I mean,
but what's the onus on the lenders
right.
and the
What's the
GSEs?
Yes.
Yeah, but yesterday in Steve's...
Who's got the power in that scenario?
That's
in
right.
Steve's research yesterday, I was just dumbfounded by the anchoring to...
But there's the word.
The assessed value on the land, right?
Yeah.
I mean, appraisers, and to your point on appraiser... on whether there's an appraiser shortage. I'm here to rise and tell you there's a tremendous appraiser shortage. There's no
Ernie's
shortage
getting emotional.
of licensed
He's getting emotional.
people
Somebody
out
qualified.
there. But there's a tremendous
I understand.
Jones,
shortage,
calm him
or
down.
we wouldn't have that anchoring, right? And by the same token, we wouldn't. I'm with you, Mark. I mean, how do we add to the process if we're basically affirming public record data and the price, right? So we have to behave independently if we're going to protect ourselves as a useful contributor. And one more thing.
Oh, he's going to beat me up now.
We are not in the business of protecting the consumer, Phil. I'm sorry. That's not the intended user of the report, and it's not the reason why we're writing the report. We're in the business of answering a question for our client, which is the lender. Ultimately, the benefit is to the consumer, but I don't want, my E&O provider also doesn't want me tied to the consumer.
Okay, so that's the paradigm shift. Right there you see it. So, folks, I'm giving you everything that we're talking about in Washington, D.C. It's about image. It's about messaging and marketing. That's the paradigm shift. So, Ernie, and I'll give him a big hug next time I see him. He's okay. We're cool. But Ernie is working under the fact that we are not tied to the consumer. However, if the consumer becomes our primary client, and consumers become the number one client of appraisers across the country, then your neutrality provides for the consumer protection and knowledge that we're looking for. As far as E&O insurance provider is concerned, it depends on who your intended user is. If the intended user is the consumer to help them make a financial decision, then that's the paradigm shift. So what Ernie's talking about is the old world, perhaps, and we're talking about a newer world, although there's going to be a newer world on the lending side too. Trust me, we'll get to that in just a minute. Go ahead, Kevin. Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is no offense to Ernie.
No offense to Ernie. He's fine. He's fine.
Stuck in the old ways when you guys are trying to get into the modernization.
In that comment, he's stuck in the old ways because it's about us doing what's best for the bank. Well, remember, the bank is now telling you that you're anchoring too much. You are anchoring to the sales price, so why do we need you if you're anchoring 99% of the time? And as far as turnaround time is concerned, the quicker they can get these jobs done, remember, the ratios are tight right now. So if they can get that appraisal back quicker, save themselves 25 basis points, that's real money, and that's big money, and that was also brought up in this conversation as well. So now you're seeing what I'm trying to do when it comes to the paradigm shift. So we have to work with movers and shakers and policymakers on this. They are concerned about consumer protection like anything else because it's a hot topic in Washington, D.C. And you mess with that, you're going to be messing with a lot of things. So that was Ernie's response. It went back to Mark Fleming after that. Now, what ended up happening is the anchoring conversation continued forward. And Ed Pinto and Joan, everybody was talking about this anchoring. Went back and forth, and then Mark chimed in. Now let's listen to what Mark has to say here when it comes to the waiver again. And this is his argument for the property inspection waiver. And when you look at the data, remember, these guys are data geeks. I don't mean that in a bad way. That is what they are. When you look at the data is telling you that 99% of them are coming in at contract price. Why in the heck do we even need to order the appraisal? So go ahead and let's listen to Mark after Ernie.
Through an appraisal or an AVM, you determine it's only worth $600,000, let's say. It's nowhere near the price. He's clearly overpaying. Let's assume he's not doing it under duress, to use your point for the moment. And he wants to put $50,000 down on it. Go for it. Why are we wasting our time? That's exactly how PIW, to your point, is trading these things.
So Ernie says something. I don't know what it was. It was funny. I didn't know what it was. But do you see that? He said that's how PIW is trading. So in other words, they're looking at this.
You're talking about two different intended users.
Here's my rebuttal.
So when you take a look at an appraiser working for a consumer, for their decision to buy the property, then they're working for that customer. So we are neutral, we are a third-party individual, and they are relying upon our appraisal to make a financial decision for themselves. Now, does that have to do with your risk assessment? That may not. The other question I have for you, and I don't know the inner workings of big banks, but if you're showing a 99%, what's it called, anchoring to the sales contract price, so my question is, number one, what appraisal are you given?
Boom.
Is there another one that was done that you're not seeing? I don't know. That's something I do want to point out there. There could have been another one, don't like it, call up the AMC, get another one, get this guy off the list, and then get the other one over there. So just to throw that out there.
Yeah, or more to the point, because what happens is the AMC or the reviewer at the bank beats up the appraiser.
Thank you.
I was saying, fine, I'll give you the contract price.
Okay, so there you go.
I'm sorry, but that's just like a boom moment where Mark basically says, look, yes, we understand that there's some beating up going on, and that is a big issue. And the big question is, how do we fix that? I have a sneaky feeling that some of the appraisal management companies out there are just making deals work for their clients because they work for banks. Before the crash, I knew a young lady who had a job at an appraisal management company, and her job was to create what was called the aggressive value dispute form. Kevin, it was 7 pages.
That sounds bad.
It was 7 pages. It beat the living hell out of the appraiser until finally they would capitulate and say, okay, that's fine, or just never take an assignment again, or know that if they didn't come in at contract price, the 7-page aggressive value dispute form was coming their way. These things are taking place. John Russell talks about it on the panel. Listen to what John has to say.
The appraisers in this room are among the best in their profession. They're well established. If they lose a client tomorrow, they will not lose food off their table, okay? That is not the reality for the vast majority
Here
of
we go.
appraisers.
Speak it.
Most of them are out there churning every day, taking in orders, turning back out reports. And for them, there's a real risk. And I become a hindrance to the process. If I do that too often, I'm going to be cut out. And we know that takes place. It's not like this is just some fairy tale that never happens. We know appraisers get taken off of lists because they're willing to stand up for their principles and say, hey, there's something not making sense here. I've got a gap between your sales price and what value is showing.
So there it is. He's speaking truth to power. Remember, there's movers and shakers in that room. They're hearing the God's honest truth about what's going on. So the one thing I'll tell you, these guys don't mess around when it comes to their data. They want to have their data to be accurate because that data then affects policy. So if you've got middleman companies who are not properly doing their job right by saying, hey, look, we're going to make this deal work for these banks, then that data is showing that there's a 99% anchoring. And if there is a 99% anchoring, then the banks and the guys and the policymakers are going to be like, hey, look, 99% of the time the thing comes in, just waive the damn appraisal. So there is a problem. There's a problem out there when it comes to the final product being given to the data collection individual. My solution to this is very simple. I want to have a complete, absolute record of the first submission of the report. The first submission. I'm not talking about the one that goes through the collateral underwriter, what makes it for 2.5 to 3.5. I want a first submission record of that value. What was that value on first submission before the value dispute came over? How many value disputes came over? How many times is an appraisal reordered or is one just mysteriously taken away? All of these things will help out when it comes to the data. Data is very important when it comes to policymakers. So that was very, very telling. I'm glad Mark brought it up. I did enjoy talking with him. He is pro-appraiser. He wants appraisers out there doing their jobs because guess what? It's his data. He has to go through and sift through that data, and he wants it to be accurate. Yeah.
My question is, wondering with these inspection waivers and that, do these guys realize that this is going to taint the data?
Well,
without getting these in?
Well, it could, but you got to look at it from their point of view. Our data is indicating that the appraiser's coming in at price 99% of the time. So if the bank needs to save themselves 25 basis points and turn around and get the appraisal valuation done quickly, the bottom line is their data is showing that there's anchoring. So that word is very important. Anchoring to the assessed value, anchoring to the sales contract price. So that did take place there, and I had to jump back in. Now, I gave a little bit of a rebuttal. That was my rebuttal, as you heard. And then, of course, I had to jump in with a little bit of regulatory reform in front of all of the movers and shakers.
One other thing, we do need to have complete, absolute regulatory reform. We have 55 jurisdictions in this country going 55 different directions, interpreting uniform standards of appraisal professional practice. USAPAPA is what we call it, all right? That can't happen. And right now that all of the state agencies are acting as 1-800 numbers for consumer complaint lines because their appraisals do not come in high enough. One complaint to a state on an appraiser destroys their profession.
It can.
Destroys them as a professional.
It can.
And just recently we have found out that because of the high risk to be an appraiser, if you have any kind of complaint, not even a claim, a complaint against you on a state level, your E&O insurance premium can go from $2,000 a year to $10,000 a year, effectively putting you out of business because you can't afford your insurance. So significant regulatory reform needs to happen and complete modernization on the compliance side. Take away the heavy middleman in the middle and you'll get a better turnaround time. Make more money on your BPS.
Make more money on your basis points. So that's me out there talking about the issues that we have with regulatory reform at the American Enterprise Institute. And again, thank you very much to Joan Trice and to Ed Pinto for allowing us to come in and just their hospitality, allowing all of the voices to be heard, allowing different points of view to be articulated, and it was a terrific time. So that's speaking truth to power in a small room. And special thanks, of course, to John Russell, who did a phenomenal job on that panel representing appraisers, the American Society of Appraisers, representing appraisers. I saw firsthand how John Russell handles himself in Washington, D.C. I saw it from all the different meetings he goes to. I've seen his schedule. He is back and forth, left and right. He is out there working for real estate appraisers, and he gets it. And he understands it, and he's very effective at communication. So very special thanks to him. Very special thanks to Ernie Durbin, because Ernie's Ernie, and we all love Ernie. He's a good guy. So really, it is a big deal out there. I wish all of you could have been in that room with us when we were talking to Maxine Waters' people. A lot of important points were brought up, and I look forward to furthering that communication with their office. Remember, it's not about one side or the other. It's not about Democrats, it's not about Republicans, it's not about left, it's not about right. It's about what's best for our industry. And when you have a good public relations firm with good individuals that know how to effectively deliver a message, and positive things will happen. The bottom line is this. After hearing everything in Washington, D.C. over the last week, I'm very positive about the future of the real estate appraisal profession, as long as we control the conversation and people understand what the paradigm shift will be. As long as we deliver the right message, then we're going to be on point and we're going to be okay. And I'm very proud to be part of this entire thing with Jonathan and with Lori and Janelle and Jamie and everybody else, and Pat Turner. And by the way, we still want to keep the Pat Turner T-shirts out there, but I took off Pat Turner for the Appraisal Standards Board, so we just have Pat Turner with the 2 peace signs up in the air with no for Appraisal Standards Board, but that's going to be the Pat Turner T-shirt from this point on. And I do want to have Pat Turner, I want to have Lori, Jonathan, Jamie. I want them as select speakers for findmyappraiser.com, so that way if someone calls up from a conference or anybody along those lines that says, look, we need an appraiser to speak at this event, they're going to go to findmyappraiser.com, find our select speaker list, and know that those are the speakers that are going to be going to the event that are backing up the real estate appraiser professionals. You know what else I want? I want the Reverend. I want Brian Gerard. I want Brian Gerard as the Reverend as one of these speakers too, because he would be phenomenal if he had a PowerPoint presentation together. And it's like, do you want to know what happens when you make bad loans at your bank? You call in the Reverend, and welcome to the Church of the Painful Truth, and he's going to bring it on down, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Folks, this is big time. New generation. Image is everything, especially in Washington, D.C. I've got more stories to tell you about image. We'll do that on the next show. John Russell's going to join me on the next show as well, talking about all the special things that are going on with the American Society of Appraisers. Yes, Kevin, did you have a question?
Yeah, Phil, I was just kind of wondering, since we're with the movers and the shakers now.
Yes.
How long before we have Representative Waters on the podcast?
I don't know. We'll try to get that. We'll try to get the other side as well. Look, the bottom line is this. Both sides of the political spectrum need the appraiser. Now, they look at the appraisal profession in 2 different lenses. One at risk assessment, one is social responsibility. But when you go to them and you present who we are, what we do, and our importance to them, I think that's what has been missing for quite some time in the Beltway, and that's what we're providing. That's that image that we need to project throughout Washington, D.C., and really throughout the entire consumer landscape. Whoever gets to the consumer first wins. It's just the bottom line. And if consumers, especially these millennials, I'm telling you, these millennials, they're buying these homes. These are financial positions and financial decisions that they're taking on, and they're not going to take them on unless they have the complete knowledge. They'll walk away from a deal if it doesn't make sense financially to them. That's very, very important going forward. So, Kevin, one heck of a week in Washington, D.C. We're going to continue to break down the information as it comes in, especially when it comes to the pilot programs. Are they on hold? Are they not on hold? We're going to continue to sift through that data. There really is what appears to be this, I don't want to use the word animosity, but there is a friction between Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and their regulator, which is FHFA. It appears to be, yeah.
We got to get into that a little bit
deeper.
deeper.
There could be a friction.
I didn't realize that there's friction between Fannie and Freddie.
No. Well, Fannie and Freddie and the regulator. So it's just my observation. I don't know. It's just what I'm observing. I'm sensing something's unkind there. Because Mark Calabria gave a speech at the American Enterprise. And I got to listen to the speech, and it was very much, you're going to have reserves, and we'll talk about it later. We'll talk about it in a different show because we're running long. But there is a friction there, Kevin. There's a friction, so we have to make sure that we stay up on top of it. Hey, good things happening out there. Good things. If you haven't checked out the trailer for the Washington, D.C. week, go ahead and check it out. Jonathan and I did a nice interview at the Capitol building. A new generation of real estate appraisers is taking over, and we're bringing along Pat Turner, and there's nothing wrong with that because we need Pat, and positive things are taking place for appraisers across the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our show for this week, and as always, I would like to thank you for listening as we journey through the mysteries and complexities that are, in fact, the real estate appraisal profession. I would like to thank my producer, Kevin Kinney. I also like to thank Ed Pinto, Joan Trice, Ernie Durbin, Mark Fleming, and John Russell for being on the show today, even though they didn't know they were going to be on the show, but thank you for being on the show. God willing, we'll be back here very soon, continuing to report from the front lines of the real estate market. In the meantime, you kiss your spouse, you hug your children, enjoy your day, be safe in the field. You've been listening to Phil Crawford on Voice of Appraisal. We'll talk very soon.